name Switzerland conjures up visions of snow-capped peaks and wild mountain streams. However, much of the country's middle lands consist of rolling green hills and fertile meadows interspersed with wooded slopes. The Emmental region is especially picturesque, with traditional wooden farms clustered in the lush valleys and cows grazing peacefully in the summer sunshine. The area is well served by the Emmental Railways, the third largest private railway company in Switzerland. The EBT group consists of three formerly separate companies: the Solothurn-Münsterbahn, the Emmental-Burgdorf-Thun-Bahn, and the Vereinigte Huttwil-Bahnen, which combined their operations in 1943 and whose extensive network covers the entire region. The Vereinigte Huttwil-Bahn, or VHB, is in turn an amalgamation of four other companies, all radiating from the station at Huttwil. The oldest parts of the railway have been serving the community for over a century. The first part of the VHB was opened by the Langenthal-Huttwil-Bahn on the 1st of November 1889. 6 years later, this was joined by the Huttwil-Wolhusen Bahn, which extended the track to connect with the existing Luzern-Bern route. In 1908, the Ramsay-Summerswald-Huttwil-Bahn opened its tracks to connect Huttwil to the Langnau-Burgdorf line, with a branch line between Summerswald and Wassen. Finally, in 1915, the HEB opened a line from Huttwil to Ereswil. The four companies came together as the VHB in 1944. The town of Langenthal, the most northerly point of the network, has a long association with the railways. The first locomotive arrived here in 1857, when the Schweizerische Zentralbahn opened a line between Herzogenbuchsee and Olten. The following year, further stretches of track opened which enabled trains to run between Bâle and Bern. This busy route was taken over by the Swiss Federal Railways in 1902, and today a wide variety of locomotives and rolling stock pass through daily. Langenthal station not only contains standard gauge lines, but also the meter gauge tracks of the regional service which connects Langenthal and Solothurn. The first section of the route was opened in 1907 by the Langenthal-Jurabahn, and this was joined 10 years later by the Solothurn-Niederbipp line. The two companies now form part of the OSST regional network, which serves commuters in that region of Switzerland. A branch line was opened between Langenthal and Langnau in 1917, although today only the occasional goods train runs the whole length of the line. Passenger services normally terminate at Saint-Urbain, where the Cistercian monastery was a major landowner in the region during the 13th century. The monks have now gone, but the 18th century buildings are a tranquil setting for a sanatorium. Langenthal is the start of our journey along the VHB line to Wolhusen, passing through the heart of the system at Huttwil. The VHB terminus lies on the southern side of Langenthal station, and the choice of standard gauge tracks by the Emmental group enables the railway to be fully integrated into the SBB track system, an important consideration in view of the large amount of goods traffic which passes over their metals every year. At the edge of the station, we branch away from the SBB tracks, which are heading towards Bern, and which will connect with the Emmental Railway once more, 25 kilometers further south at Burgdorf. The line between Langenthal and Huttwil was the first part of the VHB network to open, proving extremely popular from the start. The region became more accessible, encouraging further investment and expansion. Today, the railway provides an important passenger service for the local community and a vital transport link for many of the industries along the route. The countryside between Langenthal and Wolhusen is low-lying, with rolling hills and fertile river valleys. Gradients are gentle along the 39-kilometre line, with a maximum declivity of only 1 in 40. We're travelling through Canton Bern, which joined the Young Confederation in 1353. It's the second largest of Switzerland's 26 cantons and half-cantons. For tourist purposes, Bern is subdivided into 6 geographical regions. We're in the Oberaargau area until just before Huttwil, when we'll enter the Emmental. The valley was settled in prehistoric times, with archaeological finds testifying to early habitation. Many of the villages here proudly trace their origins back to the 9th century. The monastery of St. Urbain was formerly one of the chief landowners in this region. We've now reached the highest point on this stretch of the line at 646 metres above sea level, having gained some 174 metres in height since the start of our journey at Langenthal. Huttwil has been a focal point of the Langenthal-Wolhusen line from early days, and the natural location for the depot, which came into service in 1889. It was enlarged in 1895 with the opening of the Huttwil-Wolhusen Railway, and was eventually used by all 4 companies. Several of the older members of the VHB fleet are still stabled here. All the original companies operated with steam, and the LHB purchased 2 E33 locomotives for their opening in 1889. They were joined by 3 sister E33 locomotives when the Huttwil-Wolhusen Bahn opened their section of track a few years later. In 1908, the more powerful ED34 locomotives were brought into service on both the LHB and HWB lines, as well as the newly opened service from Romsey. These were capable of top speed of 50 km per hour, 5 km per hour greater than their predecessors. One of these, LHB number 11, has now returned to her original depot. After giving almost 40 years of service with the Langenthal Railway, she worked for an additional quarter of a century at the Von Roll Steelworks at Gelfingen. She underwent a complete restoration program in the early 1990s and is now a prized possession of the Eurovapo Group based at Huttwil. The RSHB and Huttwil-Ereswil railways operated with steam rail cars, which looked at first sight like their electric counterparts, apart from the funnel emerging through the roof. In 1932, the LHB purchased 2 ED22 locomotives from SLM, similarly disguised to resemble the newly introduced electric machines. In 1936, the Huttwil-Wolhusen Bahn purchased loco number 5. Not only the final steam engine to be brought into service on the VHB network, but also the final standard gauge steam locomotive built by SLM. The footplate ran the entire length of the locomotive and was a very hot and cramped working environment. Like most steam trams, she was driven by a single operator who, doubling as the fireman, used semi-automatic firing equipment. In 1947, she was sold to a firm in Winterthur, and since the 1970s has been on display at the Luzern Transport Museum. However, 1995 saw her return to her old shed at Huttwil to take part in a year of celebrations marking the centenary of the Huttwil-Wolhusen Bahn, which opened on the 9th of May, 1895. The 100 years was a milestone in the life of the railway and also for Huttwil town. Shops entered into the spirit of the occasion, with special window displays of models and memorabilia giving a festive touch to the high street. Near the station, smaller visitors could experience a train ride in miniature, the delight on their faces evident for all to see. Inside the depot, railway enthusiasts were able to add to their own collection or marvel at some of the wonderful Gauge 1 models on display. Volunteers from the Eurovapo organization were on hand to attract new members and talk about their important work in both Switzerland and Germany. The Eurovapo group at Huttwil, which works in close cooperation with the EBT group, is in the process of restoring a locomotive as well as operating their 2 working machines. Besides LHB Loco 11, they're also the proud owners of a magnificent German engine, number 64518, dating from 1940. She underwent a full restoration program in the 1980s and has been much in evidence along the VHB lines for over a decade. During the centenary celebrations, she played a full part in heading special excursions along all sections of the VHB network, with the exception of one former stretch of track, now decommissioned. The railway between Huttwil and Ereswil became increasingly unprofitable over the years and was finally closed in 1978. The service was replaced by a VHB bus, which makes regular runs along the 8-kilometre route up the Langenthal Valley. At Ereswil, the former station still exists, although the tracks have long gone, and the yard is now a bus stop. At Huttwil, we rejoin our train for the next stage of the journey to Wolhusen, now travelling over the former HWB metals. The striking livery of the three-phase RE456 locomotive we're passing was specially designed by the Swiss graphic artist Colani. Two machines were brought into service on the VHB in 1993. Electrification of the line took place in 1945, following the amalgamation of the various private companies into the VHB. A system of 15 kilovolt AC, 16 2/3 Hertz was adopted, in line with the rest of the Emmental Group and the Swiss Federal Railways. Since the outskirts of Huttwil, our tracks have been running along the edge of the cantonal boundary, and we now leave Canton Bern to enter Canton Luzern. The modern three-car push-pull set in which we're making our journey is one of the 13 RBDE 442 sets purchased by the EBT Group in the mid-1980s from SWP at Platteln near Bâle, with electrical equipment by BBC. Of these, 4 are officially attached to the VHB, numbers 262 to 265. And all in this class of motor baggage cars bear the names and emblems of various communities found along the network. They have a top speed capability of 125 kilometers per hour, although along the VHB lines the maximum they attain is 90 kilometers per hour. However, rapid acceleration capability enables them to pass swiftly between the many stations along the route, keeping excellent time. Goods traffic is vital to the well-being of the Emmental Railways Group, and at Getnau, a new siding is being constructed for the Maquis aggregate works. This is one of the two biggest industrial users of the VHB, sending and receiving 250,000 tons of freight over the tracks every year. Many of the factories and works along the line have their own sidings, giving them access to the Emmental and SBB rail networks. The station at Willisau is a modern structure, in contrast with the beautiful old town just a short distance away. A settlement grew up here at the confluence of 3 rivers. It increased in importance over the centuries, being walled during the Middle Ages. The close proximity of houses to each other meant they were always vulnerable to fire, and a disastrous conflagration did destroy much of the town in 1704. Many of the picturesque buildings which lie along the Hauptgasse date to the period of rebuilding and are today in splendid condition. The Obertor, dating from the 16th century, still guards one of the entrances to the picturesque Old Quarter, while its counterpart at the other end of the street has been sympathetically restored. The parish church, situated on a knoll slightly above the streets, offers a protective blessing to this lovely town. We've now completed almost 3/4 of our journey to Wolhusen, but still have over 10 kilometers to go before making the connection with the SBB. The impressive column of steam emerging from the chimney of the Kronospan timber processing complex is a byproduct of the chipboard production shop. Kronospan is another of the VHB's major freight customers, and log trains are a familiar sight along this line, with timber arriving via the SBB network from both Langenthal and Wolhusen. Wolhusen grew up on a strategic site where the Kleine Emmer River makes a sharp bend to the east on its course towards Luzern. The waters will join the rivers Reuss and Rhine, eventually flowing into the North Sea. The town is dominated by the neo-Romanesque parish church with its impressive spire. On the outskirts of the station, our tracks are joined by the Swiss Federal Railway's line between Luzern and Bern. The station complex is the property of the SBB, although the VHB has running rights, and some of the EBT group's trains continue to Luzern. The Kleine Emmer has carved a deep valley at this point. A short distance downstream, the river is straddled by a covered wooden bridge dating back to 1710, one of many such constructions which are a feature of the region. This type of bridge is found in various parts of Switzerland. However, the greatest number were built over the Emmer and Kleine Emmer rivers and their tributaries. They range in size from small footbridges to large structures capable of supporting car traffic. The origins of this design are thought to be early, the walls and roof not only sheltering travellers passing by, but also keeping the wooden base of the bridge protected from the ravages of wind and weather. At Wolhusen, we joined the SBB to travel to Langnau, along part of the Luzern to Bern line. This single-track route was opened in 1875 by the Bern-Luzern-Bahn, which was absorbed by the Bern-Luzern Railway only 9 years later. In 1890, they were taken over by the Samplon Railway, which itself became part of the Swiss Federal Railways in 1903. The line ran with steam until 1934, but today we travel with one of the fleet of RBDE 44 NPZ push-pull sets. 4 prototypes were delivered in 1984 and proved so successful that more than 80 have been purchased during the late 1980s and early 1990s. With a top speed of 140 km per hour and excellent acceleration, they're extensively used throughout the SBB network for local passenger services. We've now reached the summit of the line at just over 850 meters above sea level, and from here our way to Langnau will be an easy downhill run. Our train has now crossed back over the cantonal boundary to return to Canton Bern, but this time to its Emmental district. Our journey with the Swiss Federal Railways ends at Langnau, where there's been a station since the opening of the first section of the line from Bern in 1864. Langnau is the chief town of the Emmental, and an important cheese market is regularly held here. The region is noted for its traditional handwork, and the local craftsmen have been famous for their pottery since the 18th century. The settlement is a harmonious mixture of old and new, with traditional building styles well represented. The diverse culture of the region is brought together in the fascinating Heimatmuseum, dedicated to local life and history. This is housed in the Huttwil-Wolhusen, a 16th century wooden building whose name means House of the Little Cakes. Inside, there's a wealth of traditional artifacts and furnishings, ranging from a cobbler's shop to a flowery crinoline. We rejoin the Emmental Railways to journey along the EBT line as far as Romsey, where we'll make the connection with the VHB to return to Huttwil. For the first 3 kilometers, our train continues along the Luzern-Bern line, leaving the SBB metals at Obermatt to join the EBT tracks. The line we now follow is part of the Emmental Railway's route between Langnau and Burgdorf, which was opened in May 1881. Our way winds gently downhill through the fields bordering the river Emme, which gives its name to this region. We're travelling along this section in one of the 8 RBDE 441 two-car sets purchased in the early 1970s. 6 of these are the property of the EBT section of the group, with the VHB and SMB owning 1 set each. The original livery with the 3 company crests is gradually being repainted at the EBT depot in Oberberg in a smart new red and white design. Romsey, being a junction of the EBT and VHB lines, necessitates another change of train to return to Huttwil. The station is occupied with arrivals and departures in various directions. Turnouts at either end of the junction are operated manually, which means station staff are busy when connections are taking place and manpower is maximised with the help of the station bicycle. We are now travelling over the former Ramsey-Summerswald-Huttwil-Bahn section of the network, whose 20-kilometre line opened on the 1st of June 1908. For the final leg of our journey, we rejoin the 3-car RBDE 442 sets, which make light work of the gentle run along the Gröne River Valley. Castle Trocherswald, perched on the hill above the valley, has been of strategic importance since its construction in the 12th century. At Summerswald station, the tracks divide, with a 5-kilometre branch continuing up the Gruene Valley to the village of Wassen. The line was closed in 1994, although occasional goods trains still run to the Ruwer wireworks at Gruenen. Today, the communities along the valley are served by a regular VHB bus service, like the former Ereswil route. However, the tracks are still in place, and occasionally special runs are made along the line, sometimes hauled by one of the Emmental Group's steam locomotives. A birthday outing in unseasonably snowy May weather is travelling on the special Schmuckdrückli, hauled by locomotive number 11. This splendid EC45 machine from the Solothurn-Moutier Railways dates from 1911. And is in first-class condition following a full restoration program at Meiningen in Germany in the early 1990s. The village of Summerswald is typical of the beautiful old settlements of the Emmental region, containing many traditional buildings, some dating back to the 17th century. A striking feature of Bernese architecture is the large, hipped roof, with its colourful painted gables and delicately carved roof supports. Timber is a commonly used building material in the region, originally obtained from the many small woods found in the locality. Every Emmental farm owns a section of adjoining woodland, both to provide fuel in winter and for building purposes. Almost without exception, the farm complex incorporates 3 key buildings: the farmhouse, the Stöckli or annex house, and the storehouse known as the Speicher. The enormous Bauernhaus not only provides living quarters for the farmer and his family, but contains stables and cowsheds to the rear of the building. Until well into the 20th century, the huge roofs were constructed of hand-split wooden shingles, and repairs by this traditional method were a back-breaking and labour-intensive task. The roofers needed a good head for heights, and the highly skilled craftsmen took a great pride in a job well done. Immediately after leaving Summerswald station, the tracks enter a 210-metre-long tunnel, the only excavation on the VHB. The line begins to climb up the valley side, attaining a maximum gradient of 1 in 40. This is one of the 2 steepest sections of VHB track, the other being found between Langnau and Wolhusen on the Langenthal line. Just before Affoltern Via station, we reached the summit of the line at 741.1 meters above sea level, the highest point on the VHB network. The village of Affoltern lies across the fields above the station. In the Emmental, agriculture is one of the most important economic activities, and every farm has a herd of cows. The milk produced is taken to the local Käserei, or dairy, straight after morning and evening milking, where it's turned into the tasty Emmental cheese, famous the world over. The churns are often brought by traditional horse-drawn cart, although more modern methods of transport are also used. Like many other Emmental villages, Affoltern has its own Käserei, but this is on a rather grander scale than the usual modest building. The Emmental show dairy brings together traditional and modern cheesemaking methods in an attractive complex designed to provide an enjoyable and educational experience. The old herdsman's cottage, dating back to 1741, was reconstructed here in the 1980s and given a new wood shingle roof. Inside, cheese is made by the original method in a large copper cauldron heated over a log fire. Groups are able to make their own cheese under the supervision of an experienced cheesemaker, which is theirs to enjoy after it's matured. In contrast, the state-of-the-art centre housed in the main building uses the very latest technology to assist with the cheesemaking process. To keep the area sterile, there's a viewing gallery, and the whole procedure is explained in 4 languages through an audio-visual system. The operation is highly mechanized from start to finish, and the larger of the 2 vats is capable of holding 5,600 litres of milk, enough to make 4 cheeses at a time. Pipes take the cheese granules and whey into the 4 hoops where the cheeses are pressed and turned to allow the surplus whey to drain off. The cheese wheels, each weighing approximately 100 kilograms, are soaked in a brine bath and then left to mature in the cellars for between 6 months and a year. The result of all these labours can be purchased at the dairy shop, where a tempting assortment of cheeses is on display. The Emmental cheese, noted for its nutty flavour, naturally takes pride of place and makes a tasty souvenir of a visit to the region. After Affoltern, we travel towards our final destination in Huttwil, at the heart of the VHB network. We've now returned to Huttwil at the heart of the VHB system, where our train connects with services to Langenthal and Wolhusen. Whether you decide to stay in Canton Bern or travel east towards the heart of Switzerland, a trip with the Emmental Railways guarantees a journey full of scenic delights.